Hey guys, MBC1 again. We just had Florida Regionals this past weekend, and we saw that the first, or maybe you didn't, but the first 3 seeds going into day 2 were all Yveltal Toad decks, and then the third one was just Yveltal Toad, but the first 2 seeds both had Garbodor. So I thought I would put a list together and show it to you guys. I used this deck a lot before, so I have a lot of experience with this deck. I think this list is really consistent and it takes advantage of some of the new cards, mostly Acrobike. So this is my list. Alright, so for the Pokemon, start off with what you want to start with every game, which is Seismitoad. Seismitoad is pretty much the best starter for this deck. Baby Yveltal isn't a bad starter either, but you really just want to start with Seismitoad. The main difference between this deck and the regular Yveltal deck is you want to use, well, basically it's Seismitoad, and you don't really want to use Baby Yveltal as a main attacker in the beginning as much of the time, and more of a mid-game attacker or just a non-EX attacker so that you can power up things. Because instead of accelerating energy with Baby Yveltal, you're just going to be stalling with Seismitoad while you attach energy manually to your Yveltal EX, which you run 3 of. But, you know, sometimes you do want to use the Baby Yveltal to accelerate energy and stuff. You could even go down to 1 maybe, and then up the Seismitoad count to 2. That's an option. I personally like this better though. 1 Darkrai. I like 2, but I couldn't fit 2, and I kind of realized that you're not taking advantage of Dark Cloak as much with this deck, and you don't really need it as bad, since Darkrai really kind of is a pretty bad attacker right now. Even against Magnetric, you still want to use Yveltal EX most of the time. So yeah, and that's another thing. I'd like to fit a Shadow Circle in this list, so if you can find room, fit 1 in. 2 Garbodor, 1 Secret Rare, 1 Legendary Treasures, and 2 Trubbish. This is just to make the Garbodor line pretty consistent. 2-2 has pretty much been the standard count in kind of every deck with Garbodor since forever. I know Jason Klasinski ran a 1-2 line in his Toad decks for a little bit, which I thought was interesting, but yeah, that's all the Pokemon. Honorable mention is Keldeo EX. I kind of wanted to put 1 in, but I realized that in the mirror, against decks that don't run Garbodor, that do run Yveltal, you still want to get Garbodor in play, because then you can put them into sleep on a laser flip and they can't wake up sometimes, and when they don't, you can take advantage of that because Keldeo won't be able to rush and retreat, and if you just keep them asleep 1 time, you can pretty much win the match because of that, because they miss a beat and you kind of get to take advantage of that. So Garbodor helps with lasers, basically. That's the main reason. Yeah, so you're better off getting Garbodor out than not against other Yveltal decks. For the Spore line, 4 Sycamore or Juniper, whichever you prefer. There might be a glare on it. Sorry about that. The lighting in this room is really bad. Bad for shooting videos. 4 N. This is standard in pretty much every deck. Well, not so much now that we have those weird Night March and Flareon decks, but just extremely good. Great starter. 1 Chorus. I had 2, but I realized that Acrobike is extremely good in this deck, and so I did cut 1 Chorus to go up to 3 Acrobike. So we have 3 Acrobike. If you're trying to decide if regular bike or Acrobike is better, I can pretty much promise you Acrobike is far better. And the reason being, with Bike, you usually draw around 2 or 1 cards anyway. Sometimes you'll draw 3 or 4, but that's kind of if you get lucky. But with Acrobike, you always get 1 of the 2 cards you're looking at. So you can always play this after you Sycamore or played N or have a big hand size, or if you just need to keep hitting things. Basically, Acrobike is just usable all the time, except when you're item locked, and Bicycle is only usable sometimes, and because of that, Acrobike is better, in my opinion. 3 Versus Seeker. This is just to get back Chorus, Lysander, Trump card, N or Sycamore. It's just versatile, really good. I don't really run less than 3 in any deck. 1 Trump card. Now, this is a card that I was kind of on and off about. I like it because this deck you go through your deck pretty fast with this deck, especially with the Acrobikes and stuff. So sometimes you get close to decking out, or you do deck out, which is why you would run Trump card. But the other reason is because if you're item locking your opponent and they're playing Night March, you can Trump card back their Night Marchers and then keep item locking them so they can't play Battle Compressors and stuff. And then same goes for Flareon. If you're going against a Flareon deck and they have a bunch of Pokemon in their discard pile, you can just Trump card them back and then item lock them so they can't Battle Compressor those Pokemon back into the discard pile. So this is, I'm not sure if you need this, but for the current meta, it's good. Excuse me. so that you can beat those 2 decks which are rising in popularity quickly. 3 regular Lysander, sorry about that glare. It's these not Pro-Mat sleeves. 3 Lysander is just really consistent. In my bulky list, every bulky list I ever used, I had 3 Lysander. I think it's extremely good, very consistent, works well with 3 Burst Seeker. I just like it a lot. I actually wanted 4 a couple times, believe it or not. For the items, we have 1 Dowsing. Dowsing and Computer Search it's kind of hard to say which one is really better. The reason I went with Dowsing for this deck is because you have to cut down a lot of your counts so that you can fit the Garbodor and the Seismitoad. So I just wanted to be able to recycle resources without using Trump Card, and I thought Dowsing was a good way to do that. Really good for getting back your Stadium, because people are running a lot of Stadiums right now, it seems like. 5th Laser. Another Muscle Band, not as much you need the Muscle Band, but yeah, there's only 2 Float Stones, so you can get back one of the Float Stones, which is nice. You're not really going to Dowsing for an Ultra Ball, but sometimes you might want to Dowsing for a switch, since, you know, 2 is kind of consistent, but not super consistent. But anyway, yeah, Dowsing is just good for getting back stuff. It's not, I don't know, it's not ideal. It's hard to say which is better, but personally I think Dowsing is better, especially if you're going to run 1 Shadow Circle, which I want to fit, but I can't. 2 Burbank City Gym. It's, you know, I like 3, but you can't really find room for 3 in this deck. But yeah, if you can find room for a 3rd Stadium, I'd suggest Shadow Circle, but if you want to go for the more consistent route, a 3rd Burbank isn't bad either. I just can't find room for either. 4 Lasers. Lasers are extremely good right now since Virgin is not a good deck, in my opinion. It's definitely lowering in popularity. Pretty much every deck that runs Rizian or a way to stop status conditions, pretty much all those decks are dying down right now. Fairies is kind of dying down, which is confusing since Mega Garbodor seems really good to me. But lasers are just kind of playable again, and so I think they're really good, and I like them in this deck. And even against those decks that do run Rizian or things that stop special conditions, you do have Garbodor, so that helps a lot. 3 Muscle Band, this is just great for doing extra damage, making it so you can one-shot things. You'd be amazed how easily you can one-shot things with Yveltal, Laser, and Band, and Burbank. So it's really strong, do tons of damage. And same goes for Toad, those all work really well with Toad. And then 2 Floatstone, I had 3, I like 3, I just can't fit 3. And it just seemed to be the card that I needed least, I guess. I really need all these cards, but it's just the one that I felt I couldn't fit another copy of, because, and the way I rationalized that was running 2 switch. So you do have 4 switching cards essentially, which is really nice. And then 3 Ultra Ball. I'd like to have 4 since there's so many Pokemon in this deck, but like I said, can't fit it. Deck is really packed on space, and that's the main reason why people don't run Garbodor, but I think the benefit of Garbodor is higher than the disadvantage of a little bit of inconsistency and having to run less of your items. Because that's mostly what you cut is items, and I guess 1 Darkrai. So that's it for the items, and then as far as the energy goes, pretty simple, pretty standard. 4 DCE and 8 Dark. This is pretty much the standard count for any Dark deck, but I like to have a Professor's Letter too, usually, but I couldn't fit it this time. I tried only 7 Dark, and I really would not recommend that. I was whiffing too often. Even with 8 you whiff sometimes, but you can't really run more than 8 and 4. I mean, maybe you can if you want to make your Garbodor line really thin or something like that, but I wouldn't recommend it. I think this is probably the perfect count. So yeah, that's about it for the list. Alright guys, that is the full list. Thanks for watching. Like if you liked the video, comment if you want to tell me something, and subscribe for more.